Good morning. This is Dr. James Weldon. Um, Today I'm in near Asheville, North Carolina, uh, at a Earth Day festival that I'm speaking at. And I appreciate you taking a moment to hear a little bit more about my adventure, um, spiritual adventure. This is my second book on the rise of the first world teacher. And we're at an Earth Day event here in North Carolina, which I'm speaking at. And I appreciate, think about the earth today. Think about how you can make it a better place, ecology and otherwise. I gave a little talk here at this Earth Day event. I'm going to do another one this afternoon. But this is my ongoing description of my spiritual adventure from the second book on the rise of the first world teacher. And in this portion of the story, if you happen to listen to the last segment, we just completed attendance at the Silver Jubilee event in Bangalore for the Art of Living Foundation. And there was, during that event, it was huge. There was about 2.5 million people that came to that event. And my spiritual teacher, Sri Ravi Shankar, in spite of all these millions of people, found a very unique way to show me he knew that he was aware of what I was doing. And if you get a chance to listen to that last segment, I think you'll find that pretty amazing that he was able to call me to come meet with him, even though I didn't know where he was. So 10 years back from now, a little bit more than 10 years, about 12 years. So after that huge event in Bangalore here in 2006, there was another celebration that we were going off to visit a little bit north from Bangalore, in a festival called Diwali. And that was going to begin in a few days. And at this time, in 2006, my wife and I traveled north to Delhi with Sri for this event. It's called the Festival of Lights. It's a really wonderful holiday. And after a few days later, we entered another huge stadium there with 200,000 people approximately for that event. And he invited us also to see a really amazing temple. There's a picture of it in the book. It's called Akshardham Temple, which was built in the old style without any metal at all. Really a beautiful place. And at this Akshardham Temple, we walked through the complex. It was spread over an area of about 100 acres on the banks of a very famous river in India called Yamuna. And the whole campus is adorned with, a beautiful landscaping, lush gardens, incredible water bodies and flowing everywhere, colored fountains sprawling the grounds. One of the most beautiful temple I had ever seen in India. And this is outside of Delhi. And the whole area is classical Indian architecture and was built entirely without any metal at all, based upon the ancient Vedic construction principles. And even though they had that at the facility, they had a huge IMAX theater, and the story of the saint that inspired this, walking all over India some time ago in the past. And the tradition is called Swami Narayanan. So if you have a chance to look that up on the internet, you'll find that. He lived in the 18th century, and that evening the campus was lit with colored bulbs, stunning in every direction, and the main structure at the Akshardham Temple was built of this yellowish sand, like all of the buildings on campus, and it took nearly 2 years to put all the blocks in place. Very tall, about 140 feet high, and houses a massive statue of that yogi, that enlightened yogi that walked temple in the 18th century, Swami Narayanan. And he wanted us to meet the head of that order, which we did, and many other dignitaries at that event, after that huge Diwali event. So a day later, we were off to Rishikesh, in buses riding through the countryside with some of our friends. My wife and I had been trying to go to Rishikesh for a number of years, and we'd asked Sri several times to take us there, but it just never happened. And we tried to go there on our own 2 years back. We were teaching some programs there, and there was a huge event there in India with some 25 million people. These tremendous festivals that they have. He didn't want us to go to that one either, but he said, "I'll take you there someday, to Rishikesh." So now it was happening. And Rishikesh is considered to be one of the holiest places in India, amongst many such places that country has. And I'd actually heard of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, my teacher, that before, a couple of teachers before Sri. Heard him speak about Rishikesh as the Valley of the Saints decades ago. And it's located in the foothills of the Himalayas, where the sacred river called the Ganges first flows down from the mountains. And so for many thousands of years, enlightened beings of every imaginable description had passed through Rishikesh after spending time in the Himalayan mountains, meditating in the retreat centers and so forth. Coming into the town, there's a beautiful bridge that goes over the lake, over the Ganges there. And the event that he was holding, called one of the first healing and blessing courses, where he taught us how to do healing and blessing with individuals. And so that river Ganges comes down from the mysterious heights and small streams from the highest mountains in the world, stretching from China to India. And in this whole region, there's literally thousands of retreat centers, and holy spaces along the route of the Ganges. And it's said that when an enlightened being lives in any place, a portion of all of their merit and high consciousness that they've accumulated actually remains in that place. They pass, perhaps it remains in that spot. And really, in truth, it's also the subtle beings that I've spoken about from time to time also come to dwell in these spaces. Because, our universe is multidimensional. And although your house might be in a place, it could be a whole nother something there at that time. So, and over time, the space, the land, the buildings, even in all these special places, really become sanctified, and the energy remains there, and people can have very deep meditations, profound meditations there. So this is what the name Rishikesh comes from, the valley of the grace of the rishis, the seers. And when such beings pass away, their merit, which is really the true wealth that they've accumulated, can remain. And I did talk about in several of early segments in my books about how, through some mysterious law of nature, when they pass away, that merit is redistributed via cosmic law to relatives, disciples, and those that love and have such high saints. And it can be a huge boost in our spiritual evolution from saints, both in life and also when they pass. And I talk about this, actually, how it happened to me a couple of times in my life. Um, and I knew that Rishikesh was also the location that the Maharishi had his first ashram and started teaching many years back. And so it became famous in the West when the Beatles that were associated with the Maharishi went there. And I have actually a photo on my Facebook page of one of those early meetings where they're sitting in the snow with him high up in the mountains there. And he emerged from that and, of course, became a worldwide celebrity. And to put it mildly, my wife and I were really excited to come to this Valley of the Saints after all the years hearing about it, reading about it. And a chance to go. It's been modernized since then, and there are condominium projects, I guess, now, and different things like that. But we felt blessed to be with the millions of people that came to the Silver Jubilee event that we just left. But in Bangalore, and they planned a small advanced course to teach for the first time to a group of international the techniques of healing and blessings. And this program itself had actually come a major catastrophe in the world called this big tsunami event in 2004 that had killed 300,000 people in the Malaysia area, in the islands out between Malaysia and India. And Sri Sri was in the United States at that time when that event happened. When the tsunami happened, he actually immediately left the United States and rushed back to Asia to coordinate all the different relief efforts involved at that time. And so for actually for a week after the tsunami, I was told that he was actually up and traveling about the area 24 hours a day. So he flew back to Malaysia, and for 24 hours a day for 7 days, he was just going from place to place, helping and blessing the people. He didn't sleep at all. He couldn't stop. I mean, what kind of dedication, to do something like this? And he went from town to town, continually providing relief effort and actually blessing the individuals with the energy, with this amazing force, which I'm now coming to know so well. He gave himself completely to these suffering people, caring for them and relieving their fears and happiness by that power of grace and that tremendous force that he carries. And of course, I'd seen this energy work many, many actually amazing miracles in my life. And of course, I'd heard many other amazing stories that came from these meetings. And just as a little aside, I've actually set up a Facebook page for that now, a separate one. We call these the Guru stories. But it's more than that, because the Guru is a force of nature. It's a force of grace and blessing. But I've set up a separate page here where people that have had similar kinds of experiences or had some amazing things happen by being connected, they can tell those stories. And I'm going to be, taking out of all of these recordings here the little pieces of those stories and posting them there as well, so you could get all the best gems here easily. So I'd encourage you and your friends, if you have anything to say about how love and grace has inspired your life, it's so easy to just do what I'm doing here. Put it in a little Facebook live, or write it out and send it to me, or post it on that page. So anyway, so Sri Sri said at that time that the traditional relief efforts would not work. And that even though traditional care might rebuild a person's life physically and give them back their house or their food or their money, for many years thereafter, the underlying trauma would actually remain. And so to help these people, the underlying trauma needed to be released first. So, normally the Art of Living Foundation and its programs, which have been used so successfully in cooperation with the United Nations, they're really effective. But in this particular time, more was needed than the grassroots efforts that they did, which you may be aware of, that they're doing in so many different ways around the world right now. And from the work that I had seen, teaching very hardened criminals that had committed terrible crimes, they could actually let go of decades worth of sorrow and anguish in a very short period of time. However, in this particular case with the tsunami event, there wasn't even time for these programs. He didn't have time to sit down and take them through a 3 or 4 or 5 day program or something like that, which could take a week or maybe more to complete. So there was really no choice, and literally miracles needed to be performed. And that's actually what happened. And to do this, Sri Sri selected a few of his very closest teachers and empowered them and gave them a technique that and taught them something new. And they were told to bless and help heal these crowds. And I've seen him do this with large crowds. Again, another little side. I've seen so many amazing things. There can be a crowd of maybe 50,000 people. And he can say, okay, whoever is hurting, back pain, neck pain, headache, anguish, stand up. And then these people would stand up, and, he, with his intent, he would, he'd say, take a deep breath in, let go, and take another deep breath in, let go. And just with that consciousness, he would say, okay, now open your eyes. And he would say, how many of you are feeling better? And probably 30-40% of the people would actually feel better on the spot. No touching, just pure intent. And then he would do another little session. Maybe there would be, a few left, not that many out of a huge group. And he said, okay, now you need to go see our teachers. So whoever was willing could come and be healed. And quickly the stories that came back from when he was traveling around Malaysia were nothing short of absolutely miraculous. And if you've heard these earlier segments that I've listed, and I've shared in this book and the earlier one, this one in particular, I've seen so many incredible, really incredible, amazing things happen. Of course, faith is a power too, okay? So I'm not saying it's all like magic energy, but there is really, really something to this. And now they were happening, in this case, to thousands of people in a short period of time. From meeting to meeting to meeting. 7 days. 24 hours a day. It's hard to imagine. So during that special time, something new occurred. And those teachers he couldn't do it himself. And he took a few teachers and says, okay, now, here, you can do it. And those teachers with those instructions were able to invoke the kind of blessings I'd only seen in the presence of Sri Sri directly himself. And the news from these teachers who went to help those individuals from was from the tragedy of this huge tsunami. It was much greater than, of course, modest encounters that I'd kind of had. And thousands of people were helped to release the trauma. See, the trauma is in the consciousness, the memories, the impressions, the fear, the anguish. So how do you release that? And believe it or not, they were able to help these people release that trauma in a few minutes as they traveled, all these other people traveled around. And so we'd heard these rumors, and we talked to this teacher, they tell this story, the stories were going wild. And so needless to say, we were now, very excited, a small group of us, to receive that ability as well, that blessing as well. And so arriving in Rishikesh, I immediately felt the magic in Rishikesh of this very, very holy valley. And over a period of 1 week, we were there. It was like the enlightenment of the millennia of saints, and their silence kind of slowly kind of crept into us in a way that's very difficult to communicate. And on the last day there, I listened to the experiences of my friends, and every single person had had an experience of what the enlightened consciousness was, what enlightened mind was, like that, just being there. And in that at that time, it was like self-realization was abundantly obvious to every one of us that were on that small course there. And of course, it was really great to be by the Ganges there at that time. And one of the things that Sri Sri asked us to do while we were there was to walk along the Ganges shore and meditate on the river. And he said that there's in a very real way, the Ganges is like the flowing of the divine that is passing through our bodies. Everyone. And like rivers inside of us, there's a river of life that is flowing through us every moment. And when that energy becomes clear, each one of us are literally like living love and truth. And as I sat on the banks of the Ganges here and looked at that river, which had been flowing there for literally millions of years, I saw that the river was always the same, yet at every moment unique and different. And I felt, cleansed and fresh and free in that space. And as I sat there, I wondered in the back of my mind, that like my visit to other ashrams and holy places, there might be something special that I could take back from my experience there. And in the quietness of my mind, honestly, I didn't say it in the book, but I began to pray to that flowing life, that river, by the riverside, and I thought about all the things that I had experienced in my life. And by far the most significant story I had to tell, at least for me, was that vision I had been given on the plane of enlightened beings, on the finest level of the universe, the subtlest level of creation. And something in those moments, something had opened and taken me I'm still looking to comprehend it now, many years, I said 30 here, but many more to comprehend. And this was the truth that we all eternally exist in that place, whether we know it or not, in that timeless form that I had experienced. And this is actually known as the Buddha body, Bud, the bubble, or in the terms of the Hindu tradition, the linga of the self, Shivoham, Shiva linga. A limitless form that always exists on a level of life which was really eternal, on that plane of creation. And I'd seen this representative bubble at the center of spiritual centers and of many very famous temples and so forth in India, these little lingas, if you know what I'm talking about. They're kind of like an egg. And in the pictures of Buddha, actually, for many years, we'd see these tankas, and they would have all these yogis, all these Buddhas, kind of floating in the space. Do you know what I'm talking about? With the flowers around and the hair around, and they'd be in the center of that. And also, this particular form and image is at the center of the Ka stone, the Kabbalah, in the Islamic traditions as well. Do you know that at this huge place where all of the Islamic devotees go round and round, where there's thousands of, maybe millions of people at certain times. Do you know what it's the center of that? A Shivalinga stone. It had been broken up, by the way, but it's actually apparently was smashed, but it was still there. But they actually took the pieces and set it up right at the center of there. You know, and I'd bought such oval rocks from Indian stores, and felt that they weren't complete somehow, and that they didn't seem to be alive to me. And I walked along the shores of the Ganges and I meditated, and a prayer in my heart, almost hidden, maybe for some proof of this reality on this very fine level of life. You know, and I wondered and felt a very deep intuition in this place, in Rishikesh, where for me it seemed to be the manifestation of that insight was so apparent to so many people. This connectedness with the big life. And I wondered that I might receive such a living, what I call a living linga, directly. There. This was what was deep in my heart as I was traveling along this wonderful location. As I walked up and down day after day and meditated in that spot along the Ganges. I was thinking, maybe this is something I can take back to America from this incredible journey that I'd had in this most unbelievable sacred place. And over this week, I walked the shore and I looked into the water and I watched it. I said, oh, maybe this is it. I walked. So as I'm walking along, my eyes are peeking out. They're looking along the water. Maybe there's something there. And I watched for that, believing it was possible, but I hadn't found what I searched for. I collected a few samples, but in my intuition said nothing about this. So we'd gone the entire week, and again, these things are, I'm sharing absolutely true what happened to me. On the day before our departure, I was walking along the shore again, nearby Marshi's old ashram, so the place we were, you could get into, you could actually see some of the old ashram of Marshi's nearby. And the day was so beautiful, sparkling sunshine, shining off the water in a million ways, and the air and the blowing trees and the wind. It seemed so alive. And I was almost floating through the space, unconscious, as I was, racing around the locks and by the sanding shore, kind of with glee. I'm just skipping along like a 2-year-old child, or not 2-year-old, maybe 5-10-year-old child. And suddenly I stumbled, and my foot fell into a deep hole, and in the rocks, almost up to my knees. I mean, it's like something gave way. Literally, my leg went down in the mud, and I was, I was wearing sandals, but they're open toes and all of that, and I actually fell downwards into that hole. And as I fell down, I felt a prick along the side of my foot at where my toe, literally as if I'd been bitten by a snake or maybe a scorpion. And I actually thought, oh, well, maybe I had been bitten. It was like there's a strike. It was a strange sensation. As I drew my foot out of the hole, I examined my toe and I looked for a sting but there was no bite. But, but actually the entire 2 or 3 toes on that right foot were already beginning to turn black and blue. They were changing color. And without thinking about it, I actually reached down into that hole, all the way up almost to my shoulder to see what was there. And there it was. This was something special. And I knew this as soon as my hand touched it. The energy crackled and came up that space all the way up, and it was immediately as I touched something down there, and there it was. I slowly drew my hand out, and there was the perfect oval linga, at the bottom of that hole in the sandy soil. This is sandy soil with lakes, with water running along it. How there was, I'm just thinking about it now. How could there be, with water running along, a hole in the sand? I don't know, because it was as if I'd reached into a womb and I was delivering a baby. And slowly I drew this lingle out and I cradled it in my heart. Okay. And on my subtle perception, it looked like a miniature sun radiating brilliant white lights in all directions. And it measured perhaps 3.5 by maybe 2 inches, like a little dinosaur egg. And it was sandy, white, and mottled, kind of gray with a tinge of brown and orange. So, in my book, and I'll post this online. Actually, I have a picture of me holding that. And this mysterious linga, it appeared. It was hard to see physically because my perception kept going back to the subtle. I was just falling into this unbelievable space. And it really was like I was holding a tiny star, and my hand radiated and pulsed with the energy, and I kept on being drawn back into the beam and life. And immediately, I was just so astounded that I immediately went, to actually find my wife, because I'd been talking to her a little bit about this idea, because I was so excited about this gift that somehow I'd received from Ganges. This is a manifestation of the Divine Mother energy. And as I met Rama a few minutes later, I was hobbling because of this bruise on that side of my foot that slipped into that sandy hole womb. Yeah. And so by now that bruise has actually spread, and I actually wondered if I had a fractured foot or something. So many times, in life, if you read my story, I've had a difficulty, a fall or something kind of dramatic to wake me up about what I needed to do. I guess that's when you're a little dumb. I admit, what I needed to do. And I wondered if it was the energy that of this linga that somehow had struck me as I accidentally touched it with my toe. If my intuition was clear, perhaps I would have found it another way. But as I walked up the concrete pathway back to the ashram, I marveled at what I carried. What did this mean? I wondered. And actually, as I saw Rama, this is a true story, I swear to you guys, I was immediately brought back to earth again. I was shocked because Rama was actually limping too. She was limping. This is my dear wife. She was limping. And I said, what happened? And she says, I don't know. Something happened a little while ago. And she says, look at my foot. And as I was walking along, I suddenly felt this pain, and I didn't fall or anything at all, nothing. And as I looked to her, her foot was also bruised as a reflection, the opposite side, in the same location. It was like we were mirror images as we faced each other. So me on my right, I guess her on her left. And this was too strange. And I said, look what I found. And I showed her the link and I said, remember I told you that I was hoping to find this is a sacred object. This is a very powerful sacred object. I had no knowledge of this. And as time goes on, a lot more understanding came, by the way. I was hoping to find something along the Ganges. And I can't believe what I found. I prayed for it, and I was just walking on Ganges, climbing over some rocks, and I slipped into a hole in the ground. And I hurt my foot, but didn't even think about it much. And when I put my hand down on the hole, this is it. Isn't this amazing? I was too amazed by the events this week to speak anymore. And anyway, Sri had just called us, and there was a very special guest. And we had just had time to eat and make our time to that meeting. And early, we both hobbled toward the dining hall. And anyway, I was hungry, and now it was time. I was thinking about that. We'd actually not seen much of Sri over the last week. And he told us why. He said, what needed to happen here could not happen if I was physically present with you all the time. That's what he said. The healing and the blessing ability, which this was the program given to us, had to make us take a different course during that time than just looking and laughing and hearing cool things. And at that event, also he brought in some saints, and we met then with a 103-year-old saint there. This afternoon included a special gift. His title was Vishwaguru, and he was the oldest permanent saint in Rishikesh, in the valley. And we'd been staying at his retreat, his ashram, without even knowing about him. And at 103 years old, he was quite a treat to meet. I chatted with him briefly about this amazing event that had affected me so deeply in 1976, and he got it immediately. He nodded and listened to my story, and then invited me back to come to his ashram again. He said, consider this place your second home. I haven't been back since, but I would really like to go again. Anybody would like to go, I'd be happy to take you. And I hope that I would be returned to Rishikesh, and it was absolutely amazing event. And so over the next 45 minutes, Sri, I'll let everyone to share their experiences of the last week. And everyone had some kind of clear enlightenment, I would say, experience. And I didn't speak at all to the group about this, but it was an important sharing. It was the first time that I had heard him ask about experiences. He never asked about that. And he told us, now you can share your experiences. And back in my roof, my wife and I began to pack on our journey back home to Delhi. And I had some time to share with her my experience at the bank of the Ganges and more details about this amazing something, this linga that I had received there in such an unusual way. I'd also had time to actually wash the linga off and remove some of the encrusted sand to see really what it looked like. And we were actually on the plane. And what was amazing is that it dried. Again, this is a true story. Okay? A faint image began to appear on the surface of that rock face. It became more and more distinct over the next week. And I tried to imagine the journey that this particular stone had made over millions of years, from maybe the center of the earth as a molten rock to what I now held in my hand. And the Himalayan peaks were formed when the two continental plates merged 50 million years ago. That entire region was once the ocean floor, at the edge of two great continents that slowly separated and then drifted together in over 300 million years. Where these plates met, the Himalayan mountains, the peaks formed, the highest peaks on the planet now. But where I'm living right now in Boone, North Carolina, was the Himalayan, was the last Himalayan. Well, right now, and we're not that high. We're about 2,500 feet. But Boone was the Himalayas of an earlier, much earlier age. And over this vast period of time, the rains that fell year after year quite worked their ways into peaks, into the crevices, and the rocks slowly loosening, smaller and larger boulders. And these rocks were washed down into swirling rims and eroded as glaciers made their way across the landscapes, the entire world that we now know. And all the people had come and gone. The entire history of all humans was only a total small fraction of this passing time. And at one moment in this vast drama, Yogadhi found his foot stuck in one of those crevices that formed this womb, that life that we call the Ganges brought, nourishment. And I took one of those small rocks from that place back with me to the United States. And there's a photo of it in the book. And at the end of this long journey, now, I held this rock in my hand. Listen, life is so amazing. There's so many things we can't explain, and I'm not trying to, but as I held that hand, and I was looking at that linga, and the image, I held surfer there was an image on that, and it was identical to the amazing story of my life. That was the image. The image was on the surface of the linga of what happened to me in that 1976 experience when Sri Sri took me out and took me to. There was something that happened. There was something that I saw, me being in a bubble like that, the Bud Bada. That was actually there was an image of that, quite clear, unmistakable, and I have some photos of that if you want to verify. Believe, don't believe. This is like Ripley's Believe It or Not. Believe it or not. This is beyond belief, and how true. And how long would that rock have to sat there to finally make its way into my hand? And during the next year, I hid this very quietly, secretly, about this, and used it with meditation. And I tried to explain this discovery, but words absolutely failed me. So linga, India has a long history of recognizing and respecting these, what they call the true lingas. And the greatest saints have held them at the center of their sacred prayers to divinity. We have one here in Boone, the Art of Living Retreat Center, but I have my own, which I haven't talked much about. And, Sri Sri has a crystal linga that is used in India. If you've been to those Shiva pujas, you may have seen that. And that form of that crystal linga is what he took me to, what I experienced. Once a week they do that. So this has gone on a little bit, but I want to talk just a little bit more. It's something to think about. There's another great saint in India. His name is Sai Baba, who has passed away. He was a tremendously great spiritual teacher in India. And these things would show up sometimes, would manifest for him. And said that they have tremendous spiritual healing power. And so I've got a picture of him, which he invited me to come see him, but I never made it before he passed. And Sai Baba, he had a golden in all the temples in India is where millions and millions of people have visited. You know this, all of you, that you know, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people go to temples in India just to see and be near these powerhouses. And there's a whole tradition around them and a whole series of um, pundits that, energize them. So, Yogadhi, obviously to have experienced, to receive such an incredible gift this way after, my prayers, meditating in Rishikesh was unbelievable. Another boon. And so I soon began to appreciate how powerful it was, because as I went to different meditations and chanting events in Boulder, I hid this back for a number of years and watched how this subtle energy would flash out and bring the energy up, and I would hold this like quietly. No one knows what was going on, and I would see again and again with amazement how powerful the energy would flood out during intense times. And I believe that there is a special destiny, and I'll end up here. So now I was talking about the Rocky Mountains here. I thought that, the retreat center would be in the Rocky Mountains. I picked the wrong Rocky Mountain range. Now I'm in Boone at the Blue Ridge Mountains. I believe that there was a special destiny attached for this gift for the area. And the ashram that Sri told me someday would happen. This is why I was a little bit so crazy about it. Because, so we'll end now, and I'll start another segment here shortly. Talk a little bit more about the dream for the great spiritual city like Rishikesh. Really, my dear friends, Rishikesh for the U.S. in the U.S. This is what's happening. Now, people don't know, but so I'll give you a break. I've talked enough, but let's come back for another episode here in a few minutes. And I appreciate you taking a moment to listen. These are going to be all available on YouTube freely till the end of time, and so that I honestly can share what I pass through. This is all about understanding, a bridge in our understanding, so we can begin to appreciate some of these very deep and profound realities. So I appreciate you taking a moment to listen to me, and I'll be back again just in a few minutes to do another session. Join me again. This is from my book, forthcoming book here, on the rise of the first world teacher. And namaste. Something to think about, huh?